Welcome to Dr Joe Unplugged. This podcast contains general information and is not in any way medical advice. Is coffee good for us? It depends how you define good. One aspect with health that is severely underestimated, it really never gets any airtime, is enjoyment. If we're enjoying life, two really important factors. Number one, it's good for our mental health. It reduces our stress level. We feel better about the world. Number two, if we're feeling better, we're enjoying our life more and we're getting more out of life. Sounds a little bit circular, but it's still a very important thing. So if we are being healthy and we're living longer because we've been healthy, then we don't necessarily want to be miserable for longer. We want to be enjoying our life. That's the whole idea of looking after our health, is that we're in a better position to do what we want to do and be able to do it for a longer period of time. So it's ultimately the journey, not the destination, because we're all going to reach the same destination and you all know what that is. All right. Coffee, the number of studies on coffee I find quite extraordinary. Coffee is not therapeutic. Now, one writer on that. There are and were, and probably in some parts of the world still exist, some medications that have caffeine in them, which is used to treat migraine headaches, and people who drink coffee, if they're suffering from migraines, some of those people may find that if they're drinking coffee regularly, that they might be less prone to migraines. Not everybody. And I do want to emphasise it's not a treatment as such, but there does seem to be some benefit. And yes, some over-the-counter medications for migraines have contained caffeine together with other components. Among 6,001 health and retirement study participants in the US, and I'm quoting, drinking more than 2 cups of coffee a day was associated with a 28% lower risk of dementia over 7 years compared to drinking less than 1 cup daily. I really worry about what a 28% lower risk is. Is that 28% less going from 0.5% to 0.3 something percent? Is it going from 1% down to 0.72%? Ultimately, 28% reduction sounds really impressive, but what is the absolute reduction? They never tell us because it just doesn't get headlines. And that's over a 7-year period. Moderate tea drinking up to 2 cups a day was also associated with lower dementia risk compared to no tea consumption. Once again, it's a statistical correlation. When total caffeine intake derived from coffee and tea was calculated, participants in the highest quartile of caffeine consumption had a 38% decreased risk of dementia. Is it the caffeine that's doing it, or is the caffeine proxy for something else? There have been other studies done, one in the UK. They looked at 8,500 people, looking at correlations between caffeine consumption and intelligence and cognitive decline. There was work done in Australia on a fairly small group of 227 cognitively unimpaired older adults, found, according to the researchers, greater coffee consumption associated with lower cognitive decline. And they're saying there's slower accumulation of beta amyloid in the brain. Again, what is slower? These are all relative terms. So it's pointing us in a bit of a direction. But the question that arises, is it the caffeine or is it something else? And that something else could be that people are using their brains. Now, we know that, and there's a strong association, but take it at that, between challenging the mind, challenging the brain, and lower rates of dementia. People who stay in the workforce for longer, employed, self-employed, doesn't matter, running your own business, have lower rates of dementia, and that's been shown in Japanese and Korean studies. Doesn't mean you have to work forever. But it's not about that you're working, and it's not about that you're earning money. It's about that you are having to think about issues and maybe think about that which you haven't thought about before. There's a new problem to solve. There's a new matter to deal with. Every time we have to think about an issue in a slightly different way, or think about a problem we haven't thought about before, or even think about a similar problem in a different context, we are creating new neural pathways within the brain. New neural pathways. Keeps the brain active. In the same way, when we are exercising, we are creating new muscle fibers. not necessarily directly at the time, but as part of the response. Part of the benefit of exercise is we actually stress and damage some of the muscle fibers. That's why it might hurt a little bit. But then the repair mechanisms means we end up with stronger and in some instances bigger muscles. The brain doesn't get bigger, but it makes more connections. And those connections, it's those connections that are very, very critical. So could it be that the people that are drinking coffee are sitting at their desk, either at work or at home, and they are concentrating on some matter that they're needing to deal with, and that those are the people who are actually consuming more coffee? And we know this. We know that human behaviour is, I'm heading off to work, I'll get a coffee on the way. Or it's morning tea time. Interesting, it's always been called morning tea for whatever reason. It could be morning coffee time or morning water time. So again, I'm having my cup of tea or coffee because I'm having a bit of a break from my work. Maybe I'll take it back to my desk. Again, maybe I'm sitting at home on a Zoom meeting. That has not been looked into. So the idea that just drinking a couple of cups of coffee per day, and includes a couple of cups of tea because tea has caffeine in it as well, is of itself a protective factor against a cognitive decline, notwithstanding that the researchers say the results support this hypothesis. And again, it's still a hypothesis. So they're not saying it does. They're saying the work that they've done is supporting this hypothesis because they've got some statistical correlations and links established. I really do wonder if it is a proxy for something else. But previously, and this is probably another key point to make here, and we'll wind up on this one. For years, there was lots of criticism of coffee. It was meant to be bad for us. We shouldn't be drinking coffee. It'll keep us awake at night. And for some of you out there, it may well do. Caffeine is a mild stimulant. But if that does affect you that way, then you've got a couple of options. One is just not to drink tea or coffee after, say, 2 or 3 or whatever hour in the afternoon. Have it in the morning, and that's fine. And for some people, they can go with the decaffeinated. Now, I'm not a massive fan of decaf personally. And a bit like on a previous podcast, we talked about artificial sweeteners and sugar. As soon as you're decaffeinating, your coffee, you're subjecting it to increased amount of processing. And, immediately that creates its own issues. But look, if you like some decaf, it's not a problem. Probably don't have too much of it because of the amount of processing that goes into it. But I think it's more important that it is okay to drink some tea and coffee. And if you don't like drinking tea or coffee, there is no case to be made for doing it on the basis, if I have this, it's a treatment, it'll stop me getting dementia. No. If you do like doing it, you don't need to worry about it being harmful. It isn't. Coffee, actually, I was about to finish up, but I'll make one more point for people who don't know, because this was fascinating. Coffee is part of the apple family. Now, maybe some of you knew that. I didn't until some years ago. I was in North Queensland. They have a coffee plantation. And if you think about an apple with peel, with some fruit and some seeds, a coffee bean, or coffee fruit, if you like, is peel, very, very little fruit, next to no fruit, and the seeds. And it's the seeds that are the beans, and the beans obviously get roasted, and then we end up with coffee. So that coffee as a member of the apple family is a little bit of trivia. But it also tells us that it's a natural product. Yes, it's subject to some processing, although roasting and then grinding is not the highest amount of processing you put anything through. We roast our meat as well. We fry our foods. So heating it up and roasting it is not a particularly complicated process. And yeah, some people do it better than others, and that's why everybody's got their preferred coffee roasters. Enjoying life is important. Enjoying life is important. If you enjoy your coffee, then you can and should do that. If, and I want to underline if, there are some side health benefits, whether it's protecting the brain or something else, that's a bonus. It really is a bonus, because we don't know. We really don't know. This work is interesting. Previous work is interesting. I don't think it proves anything. But if you enjoy your coffee, or if you enjoy your tea, or if you enjoy any other type of food or beverage, and you're doing it in a manner that is not excessive, and you're getting enjoyment out of it, then that alone is good for your health. Thanks for listening to Dr. Joe Unplugged. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, like, and share. You can also follow it on all the socials. There'll be new content uploaded each week.